Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing a story that you might have actually lived through yourself, and trust me, it's a love story. Are you ready? Let's go! She was 59 years old, sitting alone in her New York newsroom at midnight, when she realized she had fallen completely in love with a man 28 years younger than her. But what she discovered about him that same night was a secret so personal, so painful, that not a single word of it had ever made it into any of his stories. Okay girls, settle in, because I need to tell you about something I read that completely stopped me in my tracks. I was going through some stories online a few weeks ago, and I came across this woman named Margaret. Margaret was 59 years old, a newspaper editor in the heart of New York City, and let me tell you, she had dedicated her entire life to words. Not to love, not to romance, not to any of that, just words, pages, deadlines. The kind of woman who stayed late when everyone else went home. Oh, who knew every journalist on her team by name? Who could rewrite a headline in 10 seconds flat and make it sing? She was sharp, she was respected, and she was deeply, quietly lonely. She had been divorced for 11 years. Her kids were grown and living in other cities. Her apartment on the Upper West Side was beautiful and silent in the way that only truly empty places can be. She told herself she was fine. She had her career, she had her routines, she had her Saturday morning coffee at the same little cafe on Amsterdam Avenue. She was fine. And then Daniel walked through the door of her newsroom. Daniel was 31 years old, a freelance journalist who had been covering international conflict zones for the better part of a decade. He had just come back to New York after 2 years abroad, and he was looking for something steadier, and something that kept him in one city for longer than 3 weeks at a time. Margaret hired him on a Tuesday afternoon after a 15-minute conversation that she later told a close friend felt more like 2 hours. He was tall, quiet in the way that serious people are quiet, and he had this way of listening to someone that made you feel like you were the only person in the entire building. Margaret noticed all of this and immediately told herself it meant absolutely nothing. For the first 2 months, everything was completely professional. Daniel was exceptional at his job. He turned in clean copy, he met every single deadline, he never once complained, and the other journalists on the team respected him immediately. Margaret found herself reading his stories twice, not because they needed editing, but because something about the way he wrote made her chest feel tight in a way she had not felt in a very long time. She told herself it was admiration, professional admiration, nothing more. But girls, you already know where this is going, do not you? It started with late nights. The newsroom had a major investigative piece running, and Margaret and Daniel were often the last 2 people in the building after 9 in the evening. They started talking. Really talking. Not about stories or deadlines, but about life, about choices, about the things you sacrifice when you dedicate yourself completely to your work. Daniel told her about the places he had seen, the things he had witnessed, the way certain images stay inside you no matter how many years go by. Margaret told him about the years after her divorce. Oh, about learning how to be alone in a city of 8 million people, about what it feels like to love something as abstract as a newspaper when the rest of your life feels hollow. One night, somewhere around 11:30, Daniel looked at her across the conference table covered in printed pages and said very quietly that he had never met anyone who understood the weight of words the way she did. Margaret laughed it off. But when she got home that night and sat down on her couch in her silent apartment, she realized her hands were shaking slightly, and she realized with a clarity that absolutely terrified her that she was falling in love with him. She did not sleep that night. She sat by her window looking out at the city and had a very firm conversation with herself. She was 59, he was 31. She was his boss. This was not something that could happen. This was not something she would allow to happen. She was a grown woman, a professional, a respected figure in her industry. She would handle this the way she handled everything else in her life, with discipline and common sense. And then the very next evening, Daniel knocked on her office door at 10 minutes past 8 and asked if he could talk to her about something personal. Margaret said yes. He sat down across from her and was quiet for a long moment. And then he told her the secret. The real secret, the one that explained everything about him, the one that lived underneath every story he had ever written, The one that was the actual reason he had spent the last 10 years running toward conflict zones on the other side of the world instead of building a life in the city where he was born. And Daniel had grown up watching his mother suffer in silence inside a marriage that was slowly destroying her. His father was not a violent man, but he was cold and dismissive in the particular way that leaves marks no one can see. Daniel had watched his mother shrink year by year, watched her stop laughing, stop dreaming, stop being the woman she was before. And he had made himself a quiet promise when he was very young that he would never, under any circumstances, be the reason a woman felt that way. He was terrified at his core of becoming someone who diminished the person he loved. So instead of risking it, instead of letting anyone close enough to find out, he had simply kept moving. New city, new country, new assignment, always somewhere else, always just out of reach. He had never told anyone this before Margaret. The room was very still when he finished talking. Margaret looked at this man sitting across from her desk and felt something she did not have a word for yet. It was not pity. It was not sympathy exactly. It was recognition. The way you feel when someone describes a feeling you have carried alone for so long, you assumed no one else in the world had ever felt it. She told him about her own marriage, about the slow erosion of it, about the version of herself she had lost somewhere in those years and spent a long time quietly rebuilding after the divorce, about how strange it is to start over at an age when the world assumes you are already finished. They talked until past midnight, and when Daniel finally stood up to leave, he paused at the door and said that he had not felt this understood by another human being in as long as he could remember. Margaret sat alone in her office for a long time after he left, and she made a decision, not an impulsive one. A careful, eyes wide open, full awareness of every complication decision. She was not going to run from this. She was not going to shrink from it or talk herself out of it or let fear make the choice for her. She had spent too many years doing exactly that. She was 59 years old and she was choosing herself this time. What happened between Margaret and Daniel after that night did not happen quickly. It unfolded slowly, the way real things do. There were conversations, there were honest, uncomfortable moments where they both named the fears out loud instead of pretending they were not there. There was a point where Margaret told her closest friend everything, fully expecting to be talked out of it, and instead her friend looked at her for a long moment and said she had not seen Margaret look this alive in years. They are still together now. It is not without its complications. There are people in their lives who do not understand it, who raise their eyebrows, who make small comments that are not really small at all. Margaret hears all of it, and she lets it pass, because she spent a very long time letting other people's comfort take up more space than her own happiness. She is done with that now. She told the person who shared her story that the thing she wants other women her age to understand is this: the version of yourself that still wants things, that still feels things, that still has the capacity to be completely surprised by life, that version does not have an expiration date. She is still in there. She was always in there. Sometimes it just takes the right Tuesday afternoon to remind you. Okay, gorgeous people, that is the story of Margaret, and I genuinely could not stop thinking about it for days after I first read it. There is something about a woman who has every reason to play it safe, choosing to be brave instead, that just gets me every single time. If this story touched something in you, if it made you think about your own life and the things you have been putting off or talking yourself out of, I want to hear about it. Drop something in the comments. Tell me what you felt. Tell me what it made you think about. This space right here is for honest conversations, and I read every single one. And if you are new here, welcome to the table. We tell real stories in this corner of the internet. Stories about love and loneliness and the completely unexpected ways life can change when you stop assuming it is too late. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss one. Because girls, the next story I have lined up, you are going to want to be here for that one. Trust me.